Right, so I nipped out earlier because I mentioned in a previous video that what to replace a Cordyline Superstar, which looks like it didn't make it through winter. Two of them did, one didn't. So I'm only going to replace the one. The other two will come back hopefully in time. But you can see it's a hot day, but it's a nice breeze, so we can see the foliage moving about. And someone did ask me earlier in the week about Cordylines and specifically about, you know, quite often you get a wobbly one. And in general, if you can avoid, you know, if you're going to a garden centre, I always just go up to the pot and, you know, give it a little test if it's how stable the plant is, because if you've got a wobbly one, they're going to be slow because they're not going to be rooted well, and they might take a few years to establish properly, whereas you've got a sturdy one in the pot and that's going to establish a lot quicker and grow a lot quicker, faster for you. And I appreciate that if you buy something online you don't get the opportunity to do that, and also you buy online, delivery, you know, gets knocked about and it could loosen up in the pot. So that's the danger you take when you order stuff online. But yeah, so what we've got here, we've got a selection of 3 Cordylines. So 2 I've brought today. So this is going to replace a pink passion. That is probably not going to come back. It's not made any regrowth yet. So this is going to replace that one. And this Superstar here is going to replace the one that just totally died off, which is annoying because the last 2 winters has survived. Winter's no problem, and I didn't protect it this year when I should have done. So my fault. Paid the price. I've had to buy a new one. So yeah, so when we say wobbly in the pot, this is a good example. This is a straight Cordyline Red Star, so just the red, standard red one you'll find. This is one I got reduced over the winter, so it had a bit of winter damage, but it was already quite wobbly in the pot. So what we're looking at here, let's give that a little, I don't know if you can see that, but we can see the whole trunk moving in the pot there, and that's really what you want to avoid. And the only reason I brought this particular one is because it was £1. It's a lot wobblier than that, and what you can do if you have got a wobbly one is either get it in the ground or in a deeper pot, and any trunk it has got, you can actually bury it deeper. So as you can see on this particular specimen, I could have gone deeper with this. The light is a bit harsh, but you can see around the trunk, there's roots around the trunk there. So what you want to do is, if you've got a wobbly one, strip some of the older leaves off. If you've got some sort of older dead leaves, strip them off and try and plant it a bit deeper. So maybe an inch or 2 deeper than it already is to stabilize it, and that will also regrow roots around the trunk and make it a lot more sturdy in the ground. And that'll, once it's grown them new roots, obviously that's going to anchor it better and establish and grow a lot quicker. It goes without saying you need to water any new plant, especially in the summer, you know, probably at least every other day, if not every day, to get it established. But yeah, Cordylines are susceptible to the wobbly trunk, just due to the top heavy nature of the foliage, and that goes double for the Superstars because they're a lot thicker foliage. So again, I've done this before, but we're going to do a side-to-side comparison between the standard Red Star and the Superstar, just to give you an idea of the difference in foliage, because you see one on their own and they can look similar, but I don't think there's any doubt when you've got them side by side the difference in colour and size. So here we go, look. So the standard Red Star always looks a little bit washed out, even the very new foliage. It's a nice colour, don't get me wrong, but it's not a deep burgundy like the Superstar, and it's certainly not anywhere near its wider leaflets. There's absolutely no comparison, and also you've got the glossiness of the Superstars. So this Superstar itself, got this at a nursery. It's a little bit annoying because when I originally bought I had 3 plants originally of these, and I actually got them for £5 each because they were reduced. I'd done a video on it when I got them, but that was a couple of years back. But yeah, the standard price, that's £26.99. But to be fair, this is a plant which is 2 foot excluding the pot, so it's a good size, and you just can't beat it for a contrast. If you've got a lot of green, which I have, where this is going to go a sort of sea of green in a border, and you've got a little gap, get one of these in there and that just pops right out. But as we can see, you get a little bit of wind with these big strappy leaves, and that is gonna, that probably does want staking, and because this has got no trunk on it, what I would do is, you know, luckily I've done the test. This is quite a sturdy plant in the pot. It's not really wobbling about. You're always going to get a little bit of movement, but it's not sort of loose in the pot, and it seems like it's well rooted. So yeah, I'd get a stake at an angle in the ground next to it, you know, and loosely tie sort of midsection of the fronds to the stake to allow it, just to give that a little bit of support while it's establishing. Because even though if you buy a sturdy one to start with, if it doesn't root out into the soil straight away, you know, that whole potted mass, or the mass of roots which would be a pot shape in the ground, can still move about before it roots out. So you really want to keep that quite stable, because if you don't get a good rooting in the first season, that's really going to slow down your plant. And I've made the mistake myself. I've done that with my Cordylines divisor, and that's literally not, I've had it for like 4 years and it's putting on no size. It's still pushing out the odd new leaf, it's growing, but it's just taken so long because it didn't establish well. That first year I probably didn't water it enough, and that was too loose. So I've made the mistake, and I'm trying to help people not make the same mistake by explaining that just a little bit of thought and effort just to stake the plant can work wonders. So I'll definitely be doing it with this one. Like I say, with how wide these leaves are, they're literally wind sails. So that's, you know, maybe something to avoid if you can, getting a wobbly one, but they can be corrected. Like I say, plant them a bit deeper, they will grow new roots up the trunk. You can't well, you can put them in too deep. You don't want to bury the growing point, but you can, even on a small specimen like this, you could go an extra deep inch or so under soil level, just to stabilize it and stake it as well. But if you've got a sturdy one at this size, that'd be fine just to go straight in the ground. But when you've got a slightly bigger one, it's going to be top heavy, you know, small root ratio to large foliage, you're definitely going to need to stake that just to keep it stable. Any rocking, you know, any new roots that are going to be made underground, that rocking is just going to snap them. That's never going to establish. You need to keep that absolutely still in the ground for it to root properly. Yeah, so that is my thoughts on the Cordylines. And out of interest, this is a Cordyline. This is a straight Australis, which I totally forgot about in a pot, and it dried out and died. But it's a good example because they do get deep tap roots. So we can see the trunk here. It didn't have much of a trunk, you know, 3 inches. and you've got the massive roots, but if you look a bit further, the trunk through this massive roots, this is what we're talking about when you talk about a tap root. It's basically the trunk growing down. So that's soil level here, all this underground, this is the tap root, and that is basically subterranean trunk. So once they get established, this was in quite a deep pot, but once they're in the ground and you start getting the deep tap root, very difficult to move without killing them. Not impossible, and they will go into shock, but you can move them, but in general you plant them where you want them because they don't transplant well. And that's a good example of how deep, you know, you've got, like say, 3 inches say of trunk above ground, and we've got over a foot, probably 14 inches of trunk underground. That's the tap root, and that will just keep going down. Yeah, so that's sort of a look at what they look like underground, and a good example of not to forget about a plant and neglect it and not water it. But again, this weren't a special one. This is just a straight green, which just got tucked away and forgotten about. To be fair, that probably would have come back. The root looked alright. It's still white. It's not rotted off, but we're going to chuck that in the bin. Right, so there's a few sort of mistakes to avoid, and a few things that can help you establish your cordyline quicker, and a few things to look for when you're buying a cordyline. And I will say that you will, when you've got a cordyline, and I'll give you an example. I've got so this is the superstar here, and we've also got an emerald star along here, which I brought earlier in the season and probably planted out a bit too early because we did get a couple of frosts, and we can see some of the old leaves. Look at the state of them. So that'd be a combination of slight cold damage, because this has probably never been in position to get any frost or cold. So that's the frost damage on that. So it's sort of browned, and as they've got shocks, they've sort of turned yellow. So browning and yellowing at the same time is some sort of mechanical damage. If you've got just browning, it's probably too dry, you need to water it more. Just yellow in general is underwatering. This was planted at a time where we were getting lots of rain, and I didn't need to water it in too much. You know, I'd still give it good water once a week, but in general we had lots of rain. But the point of the matter is, this is one that's been in the ground for 2-3 months, and not really concerned about the old foliage, because you know, they do naturally lose their old foliage. That's the new foliage we're looking for, and this has been pushing out new leaves, nice healthy looking green leaves. So that's the point where you want to be looking at the outer leaves. You're always going to lose a few of them, especially when they've been potted up or planted in the ground. The older leaves are always going to, you know, be the first to go, obviously. Not too much of a concern as long as the centre growth is good, and that's looking good in the centre. I planted the other emerald star. I bought 2 at the same time. The other one's in the front garden, and I left that a little bit later before I planted it out, so it didn't see a frost, and that's looking a lot better. So I know that this is frost damage, but by doing that, you know, maybe just harden the plant up a little bit for next winter. But I will be protecting these particular superstars and emerald stars, because they're not quite as hardy as your standard Cordyline australis. Right, I think that's enough talk, so we'll leave it there, and I'll look forward to getting this new superstar in the ground. One of my favourite Cordylines, along with the emerald star. Thanks for watching.